The ghosts of Hill Manor. Hill Manor had always been the town's dark secret. Perched on a cliff overlooking the sea, the mansion was once home to the Hawthorne family, whose wealth was matched only by their cruelty. The manor fell into disrepair after a series of tragic events. The death of the youngest daughter, Lily, in a mysterious fire, the disappearance of the servants, and finally, the suicide of Lord Hawthorne himself. For decades, the mansion stood empty, shrouded in rumors of ghosts, curses, and unspeakable horrors. Years later, a group of friends, James, Emily, Ryan, and Chloe, decided to explore the manor. They were thrill seekers, always looking for their next big adventure, and the stories of Hollow Hill were too tempting to resist. Armed with flashlights, a camera, and an old map of the mansion, they set out on a foggy October night, determined to spend the night inside. The iron gates screeched as they pushed them open, and the group hesitated, staring up at the crumbling facade of the manor. The windows were dark, like empty eye sockets, and the wind seemed to whistle through the broken shutters. James, the bravest of the group, led the way, pushing open the heavy oak doors, which groaned in protest. The foyer was grand but decayed, with a massive chandelier hanging precariously above, its crystals coated in decades of dust. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced Hawthorns, their eyes seemingly following the intruders. A thick layer of dust covered everything, and the air was damp and cold, carrying the faint scent of burnt wood and something metallic. The group split up to explore, agreeing to meet back in the foyer in an hour. James and Emily headed toward the library. Ryan took the grand staircase to the second floor, and Chloe wandered off toward the kitchen, drawn by the sound of a faint melodic humming. James and Emily made their way through the dark, narrow corridors to the library, a vast room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Most of the books were old and crumbling, their pages yellowed with age. As James ran his fingers along the spines, Emily noticed a faint, cold draft, despite the windows being sealed shut. "Do you feel that?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. James nodded, but before he could respond, one of the books fell off the shelf, landing at Emily's feet. She picked it up, a leather-bound journal with the initials LH embossed on the cover. Emily opened the journal, revealing pages filled with frantic, scrawled handwriting. It was a diary, and as she flipped through it, she realized it belonged to Lily Hawthorne. The entries became more disturbed as they went on, filled with dark drawings and desperate pleas for help. One page in particular caught her eye. "He watches me from the shadows. I can hear him whispering my name. I'm never alone." Suddenly, the fireplace roared to life, flooding the room with an unnatural orange glow. The flames danced violently, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. James and Emily stumbled back, but before they could react, the fire extinguished itself, plunging the room back into darkness. The sound of faint sobbing filled the air, echoing from the walls. They looked around, but the room was empty, except for the lingering sense of being watched. Ryan's exploration. Meanwhile, Ryan climbed the grand staircase, each step creaking under his weight. The second floor was colder, and the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. He walked down the hallway, his flashlight beam flickering. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper and peeling paint, and the floor was littered with broken picture frames. As he passed a large mirror, he stopped. His reflection was there, but something was off. His reflection was smiling, even though he wasn't. Startled, Ryan took a step back, but the reflection didn't move. It just stood there, grinning. Suddenly, it raised a hand and waved. Ryan stumbled away, his heart racing, and the mirror shattered, sending shards of glass flying. He ran into the nearest room, slamming the door behind him. The room was small, with a single bed and a cracked window overlooking the sea. On the bed lay a dusty old doll, its glass eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. As Ryan caught his breath, he heard the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, and coming closer. He pressed his ear to the door, but the footsteps stopped abruptly. Slowly, he opened the door, peering out into the empty hallway. But as he turned back, the doll was no longer on the bed. It was sitting on the floor, right at his feet, its head tilted slightly as if watching him. Chloe's discovery. Chloe wandered toward the kitchen, drawn by the faint humming she had heard earlier. The kitchen was a mess of broken dishes, rusted pots, and old utensils scattered across the counters. She followed the sound to a small door in the corner, barely noticeable among the grime. The door led down a set of stairs to a dark, musty wine cellar. The humming grew louder as Chloe descended, and she could now make out the words of a lullaby. It was a child's voice, soft and sad. At the bottom of the stairs, Chloe found herself in a small, dimly lit room filled with old toys. Wooden blocks, a stuffed bear, and a rocking horse that moved gently back and forth on its own. In the corner, Chloe saw a little girl, her back turned. The girl wore a white dress stained with soot, and her hair hung in tangled curls. Chloe's flashlight flickered, and the girl slowly turned her head, revealing hollow black eyes and a burned, disfigured face. "Play with me," the girl whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally. Chloe screamed, stumbling backward, but the door slammed shut, trapping her in the cellar. The girl stepped closer, her footsteps echoing like thunder, and the room grew colder with each step. Chloe's flashlight went out completely, and the last thing she heard was the child's laughter, echoing in the pitch black. The reunion. Panicked, the group reconvened in the foyer, each pale and shaken by their encounters. James, Emily, Ryan, and Chloe tried to make sense of what they had seen, but the manor seemed to warp and twist around them. The front doors, once wide open, were now sealed shut, and the windows had vanished, replaced by solid walls. The portraits on the walls no longer depicted the stern Hawthorne ancestors. Instead, they showed the friends' faces, distorted in fear. The mansion's once grand architecture now felt like a maze, designed to trap them forever. The temperature dropped again, and a low rumbling sound filled the air. Shadows began to stretch and move, creeping toward the group. From the darkness, the figures of the Hawthorne family emerged, their eyes empty and their mouths twisted into grotesque smiles. Lily stood among them, her burned face illuminated by a faint ghostly light. "You shouldn't have come here," Lord Hawthorne said, his voice deep and cold. "Now, you're part of the family." The walls began to close in, and the friends felt an overwhelming sense of dread as the ghostly figures reached out. The last thing they heard was the sound of the front doors creaking open, but when they turned, there was only darkness. The next morning, the townspeople found the manor just as it had always been, abandoned, silent, and decaying. But now, 4 new faces adorned the walls, each frozen in terror, forever trapped within the haunted halls of Hollow Hill Manor. Hope this eerie tale kept you on the edge of your seat.